Niger will choose a new leader in a presidential runoff vote tomorrow. The vote is set to bring about the first democratic transition of power in the history of the coup-prone country. For more on this, I'm joined by Professor Chris Isike, University of Pretoria lecturer. Good afternoon to you, Professor, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to everyone.
Now, Niger is attempting its first peaceful transfer of power since gaining independence from France about 60 years ago. Looking at the electoral processes that have been carried out so far, what would you say worked properly and where were the shortfalls?
Well, in terms of geography, Niger is located in the middle of Africa's turbulent Sahel region, and that makes it a gateway state for all kinds of illicit trafficking, whether it's for drugs, for gold, migrants, or even jihadists. The Niger elections is usually one of interest, not only for the people of that country, but for Africa, Europe, and the world generally. I think that the last elections in December went smoothly enough, of course, barring the usual tensions that characterize many of such elections in Africa. I would say that the fact that there was a relative stability in the presidency of the outgoing president, Mahamadou Issoufou, I would say that, there is hope that, there will be peaceful transition. The elections went well. Of course, there are tensions there and there, but I would expect that the runoff elections will go smoothly as well. And hopefully there will be a transition. Because if you look at the players, most of the players are basically the same. They've not changed since in the 90s when it had its first multi-party democratic elections in 1993. So I assume that they've all learned their lessons and they would allow for a smooth transition from one democratic administration to the next.
Now, just looking at some of the smaller opposition party leaders who obviously have not made the cut for tomorrow's runoff elections, one of them actually mentioned that if the elections are not free and fair, they will boycott these results. What do you expect to see unfolding tomorrow? Do you think there will be a very peaceful process, or will there be some elements of violence trying to destabilize the process?
I don't think there'll be any violence in the elections tomorrow. There have not been any. There'll be minimal violence, if you like. There's skirmishes there and there before now. You see, what's happening is Niger is a country where people go into coalitions very quickly, and then they also break those coalitions quite as quickly as they form them. So it's kind of a fluid system. We have 18 of the remaining 28 candidates and political parties that contested in the last election. 18 of those going into a coalition to back the opposition, Mahamane Osman and his party. But the remaining 10 are open to negotiations from Mohamed Bazoum, who is the favorite and the current president's, anointed candidate, if you like. So I think that once those negotiations go smoothly, there will be no need for government's rigging of the elections, such that will require opposition and then violence that greets such kinds of election rigging. So I would say that the elections will go smoothly tomorrow, and if Bazoum is able to get over 50%, he would go on to become the next president.
Well, speaking about these main candidates for tomorrow, Mohamed Bazoum, who led the first round by about 39.8%, and the former president, Mahamane Osman, who actually had 16.98%. You mentioned that these fluid coalitions are busy being negotiated, and that it seems as though Mahamane Osman might actually have more of the coalition support than Bazoum. So do you think that he might become the winner instead of Bazoum in tomorrow's elections?
Well, he could if Bazoum is not able to get across to those 10 others that have said they are open to any of the two candidates. I would expect that there will be some kind of negotiation and discussions. But if you look at the elections, Bazoum won about 39%, like you said. And he's not been directly involved in some of the corruption scandals that tainted the presidency of Issoufou, which he was, a part of. He was Minister of Interior and of course, External Affairs Minister. But I would think that given that, he would be able to pull through with just about 50 or just slightly above 50% of the, votes, except he's not able to get these 10 open, if you like, neutral opposition leaders that are open for negotiation. So there will be some kind of coalition. It's part of their political, history to have those kinds of negotiations, fluid as they may be.
Now, there have also been calls for a more reliable registration system, which it's believed will strengthen public belief in future voter registers. The current government had actually begun a process to try and improve that system. Do you think that the new government, when it comes in, will actually pick up from where their predecessor left off and actually give that system regulation more as much importance as the previous government wanted to give it?
I would say yes, and that would be if Mohamed Bazoum wins the election, because remember he was Minister of Interior, that oversaw those election processes, and the mandates around it. I would expect that he would continue largely because, again, the country, the challenges around electioneering was what led to the coup, of 1993, and then again in 2009. So that's why I was talking about learning their lessons earlier. Would expect that these same players who have been involved since the 90s would prefer to have, some kind of agreement that will enable a strengthen the electoral system, inspire confidence in the elections, so that they will continue to carry on, as other countries in the region, such as Nigeria, have done since, 1999.
Now, you mentioned, Professor, earlier on that Niger is a sort of a gateway state in the Sahel region. What do you think that some of the both political, social and economic challenges are that the incoming government will have to prioritize when it comes into power?
Well, its biggest challenge is developing the economy to work for the over 50% of its population. Of its population, that live below extreme poverty. So they occupy the lowest level of the Human Development Index globally. So the economy and human and infrastructural development is a huge challenge for them. And then the second one would be insecurity related to political violence, from violence, crime, and worse of the pack, terrorist violence from Boko Haram, ISIS, and Al-Qaeda. I would think that, these will be the main challenges that the next government, whether it be Bazoum or Ousmane, would have to contend with.
Mm-hmm. And what involvement do you think the international community will have, if any, in tomorrow's runoff elections?
Well, like I said, because of its geostrategic location, like I said, it's in the middle of Africa's turbulent Sahel region. Europe is naturally interested, France being, their previous colonizers. Germany is interested, even the US is interested because, of course, with its being a gateway tool for jihadists and terrorist recruitment, for Al-Qaeda, for Boko Haram and ISIS, like I said. So these, naturally, because of these factors, again, like I said, of course, of its location, Niger has always been a point of interest for Europe and America, and it's not any different, this time, especially for the terrorism factor that I mentioned.
And just lastly...
So there would be interest, there would be participation, yes.
And lastly, Professor, if there is no outright winner by a 50% majority in tomorrow's elections or runoff elections, what would happen next?
This is a quagmire. It's a very good question. This is something that the Constitution currently doesn't provide for, but I am sure that the Constitutional Court would be able to, lay down the way forward if we were to get to that point. But it's unlikely, and I understand that that's one of the areas that they are looking to reform in terms of the electoral laws. What would happen if this was to be a situation where, it's a 50-50, or both candidates do not get up to the 50% mark. So it will become a constitutional crisis, but I'm sure that the Constitutional Court will be capable enough to deal with it.
Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Professor Chris Isike, University of Pretoria lecturer, just talking to us about tomorrow's runoff elections in Niger. Of course, we'll have coverage for you and updates as those proceedings continue.